Good morning, world, and welcome to Choices, Books, and Gifts, where you always have choices. I am so proud and happy to present a very good friend of mine. His name is Robert Mladinich. Good morning, Robert.
Hello, Jay. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Believe me, it's more my pleasure. So, Bob is an old friend of mine. We go back many, many years, and I'd like to read to you his bio. Robert Mladinich served the New York City Police Department for 20 years, retiring as a detective in 2003. He is currently a licensed private investigator and a licensed clinical social worker, specializing in criminal defense and mitigation. He's the author of 4 true crime books, as well as an actor, film producer, and screenwriter. He appeared as a backstabbing mafia bodyguard in The Irishman, and most recently in the soon to be released Don Q with Armand Assante, where he has also served as an executive producer. That's quite the accolades, my dear man.
Well, thankfully, I was able to survive my 20s and then embark on a more productive and fulfilling life.
So, with that, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what was it like?
I grew up in the Long Island area, and one of the things, looking back on my childhood, I always related to the anti-hero. When I say the anti-hero, I mean, the kind of society's outcasts, the Jesse James and those type of people. I never rooted for the good guy.
I was always rooting for the bad guy. Always, always, always. I used to think there was something wrong with me.
Yeah, and well, I didn't think there was anything wrong with me then, but when I look back on some of my choices and decisions, I shudder. But as you know, you met some of the people that I kind of idolized growing up. They were guys a little older than me, bartenders we both knew, former fighters we both knew, and these guys were all very intelligent. They all had something in common. They were all very intelligent, but they also had, very bad, alcohol or drug problems, and they were classic underachievers. They had so much potential to do well in life, or to be, productive and successful, but they weren't, and they all kind of, or at least the guys that we both know,
Yep.
died, sort of unhappy. One guy took his own life, as we know. But these were the people I kind of idolized and looked up to right up until my late 20s, early 30s, when I kind of had an epiphany and turned my life around.
Well, that's great. That leads into my next question. So, when did you know you needed to change? When did you know? Was it something specific that happened? And what were your actions to make those changes?
It was a gradual progression. I spent my 20s, drinking very heavily, carrying on. I had a very responsible job. I was doing very well in the police department, but it was like an alter ego. I would work 8 hours, 10 hours, 16 hours if you made arrests. Then all I wanted to do was go to the bar and hang out with my friends. And I had a Cheers type bar, back then in the 80s, where I liked to joke, although it's a serious joke. I pretty much spent my 20s there, the entire decade. And I would wake up every day to go to my responsible job, which I did well, but I always felt physically ill. I was always under the weather. I never really felt good physically, mentally, or emotionally. I knew I was kind of cheating myself somehow. I had gone to college for journalism, and I had started writing a little bit, immediately after college when I moved to New York City in 1980. I didn't join the police department until 1983. I always felt as if I kind of cheated myself by kind of giving up the writing. I could have done some freelance writing while on the police department. So I was always very self-critical. And then finally, in my late 20s, I think I just turned 30. Thankfully, and I don't minimize the people that have had a lot worse problem, giving up drinking than I do. But I remember waking up being really physically ill, being over the sink, coughing and spitting, and I just said enough is enough. And thankfully, for me, that worked. I know it doesn't work for everybody, and I don't want to minimize people that have far more serious roads to getting themselves together. But for me, that enabled me to, for the most part, stop drinking and engage in other activities. I immediately, how some people take up running or exercise when they quit drinking. I had to start achieving things, making up for lost time. So I took scuba diving classes, and I scheduled a trip immediately. But most importantly, and this is something that helped me later on in life, I went back to writing. I started writing boxing articles for a boxing magazine. And I'll tell you a kind of an interesting anecdote about that. I was so proud of, my newfound magazine writing career. And I went to a bar where one of the bartenders was a former fighter that, we did a lot of carrying on in our 20s. And he heard that I was having some success with the boxing writing. And he said to me, big time boxing writer, look, you don't come around anymore. You don't come to the bar anymore. You think you're a big time boxing writer, which I didn't. I was, making $100 an article, but it was just so happy. I was proud to see my name. And then, when I was drinking, one of my things that I thought made me kind of jovial and funny and interesting was I would always tell people, don't ever change. I love you like you are. He said to me with scorn and disdain, he said, you used to say, don't ever change. I didn't change. You changed. And unfortunately, this man took his own life a couple of years later. He stabbed himself in the heart. So I wish that he did change.
Yeah. That's I know the gentleman you're talking about, and it broke my heart when it happened as well. But so you're a New York City police officer. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because it sounds like you were still going through what you were going through while you were a police officer. And just in general, what was it like being a New York City cop?
Well, when I was younger, when you're young, you don't really appreciate all the good and exciting things that are going on around you. So because I had gone to school for journalism, I always wanted to be a journalist. And I kind of viewed myself as a civil service sellout rather than embracing and appreciating this great opportunity I had with the police department. So it took me a while to realize, what a great job it was, how rewarding and fulfilling it was. Right. And looking back, I didn't appreciate this at the moment because you never do when things are happening. But I really was thrust into some amazing experiences. For example, I went into the Narcotics Bureau in 1986, which was the advent of the crack cocaine epidemic. So I got to see a bird's eye view of that on a daily basis. I wound up on these task forces, with, I don't want to mention the ethnic groups, but some foreign organizations that were really big in the drug trade back then. And I worked on these federal and local task forces. And then when I got promoted, transferred from the Narcotics Bureau to a detective bureau, I was dispatched to Brooklyn South. That's what it's called. The borough is called Brooklyn South. And I thought I was going to no man's land. I was so disappointed that I had to go there. I knew nothing about Brooklyn. I had been in Manhattan and a Bronx guy my whole career. But then when I land in Brooklyn in 1991, it's the advent of the Colombo mafia crime war. These are dropping like every 3 or 4 days.
I remember.
So that was another tremendous experience. My girlfriend says I'm like Forrest Gump because there's like 3 or 4 degrees of separation between me and major incidents or, famous or notorious or infamous people. I have some sort of connection with so many of them. So Brooklyn wound up becoming a phenomenal experience for me, especially because of that war. And some of the people that I was involved in trying to arrest or arresting, one guy in particular, a mafia hitman, I wound up becoming friendly with him. He served many years in jail, got out. I wrote the preface for his book. And him and I, to this day, are very good friends and have a good relationship.
That's fantastic. And, if you don't mind, I'd like to toot your horn a little bit, too. I knew you all those years as a police officer, and I know that while you were a police officer, some of the things that happen on the job is you lose people and there are tragedies and things like that. And I just want to tell the people, Bob had one of those tragedies. He lost a good man on the job, and he went and started a fundraiser for this young man. I just want people to know a little bit about who you are.
Well, let me tell you a little more about that. And I promise all the people listening to this was not planned. I didn't know Jay was even going to bring this up, but I had promoted a boxing match between police officers and friends and family members of the officer that was killed in the line of duty. His name was Christopher Hoban. He was killed in 1988. And in May 1989, we had a huge boxing match at Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. There were about 20 matchups between cops and Chris Hoban's friends. And it had to be a couple of thousand people in attendance, completely filled. And Jay, as the Kid Calzone, stepped in and he participated. And he took all of his Queens, New York, dirty street fighting habits into the ring with him against a guy by the name of Warren Norman. And we had made up some T-shirts for him called the Kid Calzone. And the cops, being very biased, they were rooting for their own man they were yelling, "Calzone, go back to your pizza shop." But it was all in good fun. And it was, to this day, stepping into the ring is a very scary thing. And Jay did it for a good cause. He made a lot of us proud, and he did himself proud because he really put up a Herculean effort in front of the enemy.
Yeah.
Figuratively
Some
speaking.
of our friends joined us with that. The one gentleman who committed suicide, he was my corner man, and he was so very funny. But those were good and tough memories. But I just wanted to put that out there. So,
just one last thing, Jay. To this day, I communicate with a lot of these officers on Facebook. I haven't seen them. I've been retired over 20 years,
right.
So I don't see them anymore, but I see them on Facebook. And inevitably, at least 4 or 5 times a year, somebody will write, how's the kid Calzone? Do you still see the Kid Calzone? So you left a tremendous impression.
I thank you. That means a lot to me. So, there's a lot of people out there. This podcast is all about helping others, and we have all sorts of walks of life on the show. Some people in program, some people not in program, because as you mentioned, and it's one of my favorite sayings, there's many roads to Rome. But, you knew when you had enough and had to make the changes. So what if somebody's out there and they're unhappy, they're not sure, they're not living the life they want to live? What are some of the things that you would tell somebody to do and how to go about it, especially if they're not necessarily looking towards a program, but they want to do it in a different way?
I think the hardest thing to do is, I think it's easy to admit to yourself that you have a problem because every day you're waking up, you're unsatisfied, you're not feeling good. But the hardest thing, as the AA tenets say, is you have to admit that in many cases you just can't do this on your own. But that's really, really a lot harder than it sounds. I remember, for example, when I was in the throes of my drinking, if I was going to a new girlfriend's house or if I was going to a strange city on vacation, I always had to have that little bistro bar near the hotel or near the new friend. It was so important to me to have a place to call home, like a little new place to call home. And I would go in there and I would BS with the people and I'd make all these friends within 10 minutes. And I'd be embellishing and telling BS stories. But I couldn't imagine not having that. The thought of not having like my little bar to go to was impossible for me to comprehend. So, like I said, for me, it was kind of easy. I don't want to minimize anybody else's effort, but you just have to admit enough is enough. It's not doing me any good. It's keeping me back. It's not allowing me to appreciate all the other wonderful things I might have in my life. And once you stop drinking or or don't drink as much or get some type of control where you can appreciate other things, it's like this whole world just opens up. And it's and now, I'm 60. I just turned 67 about a week or two ago. And like the last 10, 12 years or 20 years, it's been a time of great growth, a lot of achievement. I like to say I keep outdoing myself. And I'm not saying that in any way with hubris or arrogance. It's just that I feel so much more complete and so much more capable. And most importantly, I just like myself more than I've ever liked myself in the past. I had so much self-loathing, in my youth and even as a young man. It was so hard to get beyond that, the self-hatred. And I think that malady is something that a lot of us have in common, in this world.
Yeah, yeah. And I do agree with you completely. You mentioned how difficult. I know for me, I took a little bit of a different path than you, and I needed a little extra help and whatnot, and I got it. And for me, that's what I needed. But can you tell me what you think some of the major differences are between then and now? I know you just covered a little bit about it, but could you keep relationships back then? Are you in a relationship now? What's life like?
Just about every relationship that I was involved with back then, every romantic relationship I was involved with, as soon as we got too close, as soon as one of the women uttered the dreaded L word, or even suggested by their actions that they were feeling that way. And I know most people will know this phrase from AA. I would start building a case against them. And I was great at building a case. And I would find all of these things wrong with them. And then I couldn't get out quick enough. And I noticed, it's been about 30 years, 35, 40 years since I thought I was like on a much better path. But one thing, looking back now, there was still residue of that up until, maybe, even 10 years ago. I certainly was a lot better at it. It matured a lot, but I catch myself now. And I thought I was like so healthy, for example, at 50 or 60. I'm 67 now. And I still was suffering with a lot of that residue. So it never really goes away. But when you get older, you just get this awareness and you're able to pick it up and you're able to understand yourself better. And I'm going to be really honest. And I don't mean to be corny when I say this, but I have a little dog now, she'll be 3 years old in May. And this little dog has enabled me to just feel that unrequited love that I never thought I was capable of feeling.
Yeah.
Love in my family of origin. There was no real, no physical abuse or anything, but we never said I love you. That was never conveyed. My mother is still alive. She's 100 now, and we have a very loving, dear relationship.
Amazing.
Yeah. But growing up, that wasn't there. And we got this little dog a couple of years ago. And I can't tell you how much this little animal has just changed my life. She gazes up at me with these brown eyes and makes me melt. And it just makes me feel so complete. It makes me so much more capable of just expressing, how I feel about my partner, my mother, when I see her, my brother, people like you. When we were drinking, we would say, love you. We never meant it. I love you, man. It's all BS.
Did.
But now you feel it. I say it with feeling. It enables me to feel.
Yeah.
I think we both know people that are still out there hoisting away at the bar, and they're not really feeling. They're kind of living a shallow, unsatisfactory life, but they get through day by day by just numbing their feelings. I don't want to numb anymore. I might have 20 years left. I don't want to numb.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And there's two things you hit home with there. I've never had children of my own. And I too have a tiny little Yorkie, a teacup Yorkie. And I swear to you, I really don't know what it's like to have a real child, but to me, it's my daughter.
You do have a real child. That little Yorkie is a real child. Believe me.
Absolutely, absolutely. One other thing I wanted to say, because what you had said earlier about doing it yourself as opposed to doing it with help, and there's, like we said, many different ways. But I find a lot of people, for me, it lasted longer because I was in denial. I understood the truth that you talked
Right.
about, the understanding. I know it. I know I have a problem, this and that, but I really didn't know there was a choice. And anybody who ever told me, Jay, you need to get some help, I would, what are you kidding me? There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with me. So
Oh,
I think that's so important what you said about admitting it and then taking the action
well,
to go ahead and do something about it.
well, I'll tell you, and I'll give you an example of something that really hit home to me, and I think back about this often. I had gone part of my efforts to change my life was I went to the Karen Foundation in Pennsylvania, and I did their 7-day family program.
Yep, I did it
And
too.
they really hit some heavy stuff there. I mean, that's no joke. You better be prepared for that, or you're going to come out shaken to the core. And they do one of these workshops. You're in there with groups of 7 or so, and they put you out in the middle of the group, and they start asking you all these really tough questions, and all the questions you don't want to answer. They wrap something around you. So first you wrap something around your chest and maybe your head. And before you know it, you're completely wrapped. That's because you're closing yourself off. So they would be asking me all these questions, and I would be giving all these great intellectual answers because I understood exactly what was wrong with me intellectually. But the facilitator, who was terrific, he kept saying, I don't give a F what you're thinking. We know you're a smart guy. We know you understand all this stuff. I want to know what you feel. And I didn't grasp that. I didn't understand what feelings were. And I think I even left Karen grappling with still being able to tap into my feelings. And it took a couple of more years for that to happen. But this guy was trying to get me to feel, which was something I had trouble doing for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And he was getting so frustrated with me. He was going, feel, goddammit, feel. I don't want to hear your psychobabble bullshit. Feel. Say something real.
No, that was fantastic. I had done the same thing, and it was the exact same experience. And especially you so more than me, because you are wordy. You've been to college, you're a writer. So I'm sure you could have given them what they wanted to hear, but it wasn't.
It wasn't what they wanted to hear.
Intelligence. It wasn't your brilliance. They wanted you to get down to the core. And I think has to do with what we just said. The work really begins later on when you're in life and having to admit and move forward and dig deep, because that's the hardest thing. I grew up in an Italian family. You grew up in an Italian family as well. And it was just so difficult to express yourself, so difficult. But we did. We're here. I'm
We
great.
made it. We made it to the other side, and we're enjoying life now.
We did.
And it's nice at our age to have come this far and appreciate what we have.
I do agree with that. The gorilla's off my back, and I can breathe, and I'm happy today. I'm happy. I mean, you're insane if you're happy every moment of every part of the day. You would be insane. But in general, I'm happy. My relationships with you, years ago, they were based on drinking and carrying on. Now they're based on love. And whenever I have an issue, I love calling you and talking to you about it. And I value our friendship just tremendously. And with that, as we wrap up this episode of Choices, remember that life is a series of decisions that shape our journey. I hope our time together was inspiring and motivating. Stay empowered, stay well, and remember, you always have choices. Peace and blessings. See you next week. And Bob, I love you, and I'll see you when you get back from your little vacation.
Thank you so much, Jay. Great to be here. Good luck with the show. It's always a joy and a pleasure speaking with you.